It is April 1945, and the war in Europe is collapsing in slow, agonizing fragments. In the shattered outskirts of Leipzig, Germany, the sky hangs low and grey, heavy with the smell of wet ash and burnt timber. The thunder of artillery has faded, replaced by an uneasy silence broken only by distant boots on rubble and the hollow creak of bombed buildings settling into ruin. Inside a partially destroyed civilian hospital, its Red Cross flag torn and blackened by smoke. A group of German military nurses huddle together in a dim corridor lit by flickering emergency lamps. These women have spent months stitching torn flesh, holding dying soldiers, and working without sleep as supplies vanished and air raids became routine. Now they are no longer caregivers. They are prisoners waiting for the Americans to arrive. Their uniforms are wrinkled and stained, hands trembling from hunger and fear. Outside, U.S. infantrymen move cautiously through the ruins, rifles raised, boots crunching over broken glass and brick dust. No one knows what will happen next. Rumors have spread like disease, stories of revenge, executions, camps. The nurses whisper prayers under their breath, some clutching faded photographs of family members they may never see again. When the first American soldiers finally push open the hospital doors, the sound echoes like a gunshot. The women freeze. One nurse steps forward, her voice cracking as she begs for mercy, not for herself alone, but for all of them. This moment, suspended between surrender and survival, unfolds beneath a collapsing ceiling where dust drifts down like falling snow onto frightened faces. The American soldiers advance with deliberate caution, boots crunching softly over shattered glass and fallen plaster. Their movements slow not from fear, but from habit learned the hard way, after months of fighting through towns that looked just like this one. Rifles are held at the ready, fingers near triggers, eyes scanning doorways and shadows where danger has so often emerged without warning. The corridor smells of damp concrete, old blood, antiseptic long past its usefulness, and smoke drifting in from fires still burning somewhere beyond the broken walls. Flickering emergency bulbs hum weakly overhead, casting long, distorted shadows that stretch and shrink with every step the soldiers take. At the far end of the hallway, the German nurses stand pressed together, backs against the wall, uniforms rumpled and grey with grime, their once white aprons stained by months of exhaustion and war. Some clutch their hands to their chests, as if trying to hold their hearts in place. Others grip each other's sleeves, knuckles pale, afraid that letting go might cause them to collapse entirely. These women have seen the wounded arrive in endless waves. Teenage boys screaming for their mothers, officers pretending not to feel pain, men whose eyes had already gone empty before their bodies did. They have worked through air raids, stitched by candlelight, reused bandages because there were no new ones, and whispered comfort into ears that would never hear again. Now, as American soldiers fill the corridor, all of that experience feels suddenly useless. This is not a patient they can help. This is judgment standing before them in steel helmets and mud-stained uniforms. One nurse, barely older than 20, feels her knees weaken as a memory flashes through her mind. Stories whispered late at night about reprisals, about prisoners lined up against walls, about mercy being a luxury no one could afford anymore. Her lips move before she realizes she is speaking, the words tumbling out broken and desperate. Bitty, bitty. The sound echoes weakly down the corridor, swallowed by the ruins. A soldier at the front stops. He is tall, his face streaked with soot, eyes sunken from lack of sleep. For a brief second, his training tells him to shout, to command, to assert control. Instead, he hesitates. He sees no weapons, no resistance, only hollow faces staring back at him with raw, unfiltered fear. One of the nurses sinks to her knees, the movement slow, almost reverent, as if kneeling itself might save her. Her shoulders shake, silent sobs racking her body, tears cutting clean paths through the dirt caked on her cheeks. Another nurse reaches for her but stops halfway, afraid that any sudden motion might provoke violence. The soldiers exchange glances, quick and unreadable. These men have kicked in doors where grenades waited behind them. They have lost friends to snipers hiding among civilians. Their nerves are worn thin, stretched to the breaking point by months of killing and watching others die. Yet here, in this ruined hospital, something disrupts the rhythm of war they have grown used to. The nurses do not look like enemies. They look like people who have already lost everything. One soldier notices how thin they are, how the fabric of their uniforms hangs loosely from narrow shoulders. Another catches the smell of sickness and fear, not the sharp metallic scent of gunpowder. A medic steps forward slightly, his eyes lingering on the red cross stitched faintly onto a sleeve. He has spent the war patching up men who screamed just as these women are now trembling. He knows that look, the one where hope and terror exist at the same time, each fighting for control. The corridor is silent except for the low hum of the lights and the distant crackle of fire outside. Seconds stretch unbearably long. The nurses brace themselves, muscles tense, breath shallow, waiting for a shout, a blow, a shot, anything to break the silence. Instead, one of the American soldiers slowly lowers his rifle. The movement is small but unmistakable. Another follows, easing the barrel downward, his posture softening almost without his conscious decision. No one speaks. The act itself says enough. The nurses notice it instantly. Shoulders slump in disbelief. A few gasp softly, as if realizing for the first time that they are still alive. One nurse presses a hand to her mouth. Tears spilling freely now, her body trembling not just from fear, but from the sudden release of it. The commanding soldier clears his throat, the sound loud in the stillness. He gives a short, calm order, not a barked command, but something quieter, controlled. The soldiers spread out, securing rooms, checking corners, not to threaten the nurses, but to ensure there is no danger lurking unseen. The fear in the hallway begins to change shape. It does not disappear, but it loosens its grip, transforming into confusion, into cautious hope that feels almost dangerous to believe in. The nurses exchange glances with one another, searching faces for confirmation that this moment is real. One of the women, older than the rest, her hair already streaked with grey, straightens slightly. She has lived long enough to recognize rare moments when fate shifts direction. Her breathing steadies, though her hands still shake. Around her, the others slowly lower their raised arms, fingers tingling from holding them aloft too long. The air feels different now, still heavy, still uncertain, but no longer suffocating. For the soldiers, this pause becomes something they will remember long after the war ends. In a conflict that has demanded constant readiness to kill, restraint feels almost foreign. They stand among the ruins, surrounded by enemies who no longer look like enemies at all, and for a brief moment, the war's rules seem suspended. No one moves too quickly, no one speaks unnecessarily. It is as if everyone in that corridor understands that a single wrong gesture could shatter the fragile balance holding the scene together. The nurse who had fallen to her knees slowly rises, supported by another's arm. She cannot stop her tears, But they are no longer tears of pure terror. They carry exhaustion, relief, disbelief, and a fragile gratitude she does not yet dare to name. The Americans watch quietly, aware that whatever comes next will define this moment forever. In the dim light of the shattered hospital, surrounded by the debris of a dying war, fear gives way, not to joy, not to celebration, but to the simple, powerful realization that mercy, against all odds, has entered the room. For a long, uncertain moment after the rifles are lowered, no one seems quite sure what to do next. The war has conditioned everyone in that corridor to expect shouting orders, violence, or at the very least humiliation. Instead, there is only the sound of breathing, ragged from fear on one side, heavy with exhaustion on the other. One of the American soldiers shifts the weight of his pack on his shoulders, the straps creaking softly. The noise breaks the silence, and with it comes a small, almost hesitant movement that will change the meaning of the encounter entirely. He reaches into his pack, fingers brushing past spare socks, ammunition clips, and a folded letter from home, and pulls out a dented ration tin. The metal clicks sharply as it opens, the sound echoing down the ruined hallway like a gunshot that never comes. The nurses flinch at first, instinctively bracing themselves. Then they realize what they are seeing: food, real food. Something they have not seen in months, except in memories or dreams. The smell reaches them before the meaning fully sinks in. A faint but unmistakable aroma of preserved meat, bread, and chocolate. It cuts through the hospital's stale air like a ghost from another world. One nurse's stomach clenches painfully, a reminder of how long it has been since she last ate a full meal. Her mouth fills with saliva, and she swallows hard, ashamed of the reaction even as her body betrays her. Another soldier follows suit, opening his pack and producing a chocolate bar wrapped in dull brown paper. He hesitates, then steps forward slowly, careful not to startle anyone, and holds it out with an open hand. The gesture is almost awkward, as if he himself cannot quite believe he is doing it. The nurse closest to him stares at the chocolate, as though it might disappear if she looks too long. Her eyes flick from the soldier's face to the bar and back again, searching for mockery or cruelty. She finds none, only tired eyes and a guarded neutrality that somehow feels safer than kindness would have. When she finally reaches out, her hand trembles so violently that the chocolate nearly slips from her grasp. The soldier steadies it without touching her, withdrawing his hand immediately, as if afraid even that might be misinterpreted. The nurse clutches the bar to her chest for a second, overcome by a wave of emotion she does not know how to contain. Her lips quiver, and then she breaks, sobbing openly, her body folding inward as months of hunger, fear, and restraint collapse at once. The sound of her crying is soft but raw, and it seems to unlock something in the others. More ration tins are opened. Crackers are passed out carefully, one by one. Someone offers canned meat, another a piece of bread wrapped in wax paper. The Americans do not rush the process. They move slowly, deliberately, aware that these women are not just hungry but fragile, that too much too fast could overwhelm them. The corridor fills with the subtle sounds of paper being unwrapped, metal lids being set aside, and quiet, disbelieving gasps. The smell of food grows stronger, overwhelming the lingering stench of smoke and decay, replacing it with something almost forgotten: normalcy. Some of the nurses hesitate, afraid that eating might somehow be forbidden, that this kindness comes with an unseen cost. One whispers a question in German, her voice barely audible. A soldier shrugs gently, gesturing that it is all right. No words are shared that both sides fully understand, but meaning travels easily in the silence. A nurse makes the sign of the cross before taking her first bite, lips moving in a prayer of thanks. Another closes her eyes as she chews slowly, savoring each mouthful as though it might be her last. The food tastes richer than anything she can remember, not because of what it is, but because of what it represents: survival. The soldiers step back, giving the women space. They do not watch closely, but they do not look away either. This is not charity performed for applause. It is something quieter, more private. One soldier leans against the wall, helmet pushed back slightly, his face unreadable as he watches a nurse struggle to hold back tears while eating. He thinks of his sister back home, of how close her age is to these women, and the thought unsettles him. Another soldier remembers liberating a camp days earlier, remembers eyes that looked at him with the same disbelief, now staring at these rations. The war has taught him that suffering does not wear a single uniform. The nurses eat slowly, carefully, as if afraid that any sudden movement might end the moment. Some hands shake so badly that crumbs fall to the floor. No one laughs. No one speaks loudly. The corridor feels almost sacred in its stillness. Outside, the distant sounds of fighting have faded completely, leaving only the low crackle of fires and the occasional rumble of collapsing masonry. Inside, the war feels far away, held at bay by the simple act of sharing food. One nurse looks up from her bread and meets the eyes of a soldier standing nearby. For a brief second, there is something like understanding between them, an unspoken acknowledgement of what this moment means. She nods slightly, unable to speak. The soldier nods back, equally silent. Neither will ever forget this exchange. It is small, almost invisible to history, yet it carries a weight that no official surrender ever could. As the women finish eating, some fold the wrappers carefully, smoothing them with reverent fingers, unwilling to discard proof that this moment was real. Others press their palms together, whispering quiet thanks. The Americans gather their things without ceremony, leaving behind what they can spare. No one takes photographs. No one writes reports. This is not an order, not a strategy. It is an instinctive human response that slips through the cracks of official history. In that bomb-damaged hallway, surrounded by rubble and silence, the roles of victor and defeated blur beyond recognition. There are no speeches, no declarations, no triumph. There is only hunger eased, fear softened, and a fragile bridge built between people who, just hours earlier, believed they were destined to destroy one another. For a brief, luminous moment, the war loosens its grip, and something unexpected takes its place. Not forgiveness, not reconciliation, but the undeniable presence of mercy, quietly changing the lives of everyone in that corridor forever. As the last crumbs are swallowed, and the wrappers folded away with almost ceremonial care, the corridor settles into a strange calm that feels heavier than the fear that came before it. The nurses sit or stand quietly now, exhaustion pressing down on them in waves, their bodies finally allowing themselves to feel what they have been holding back for months. The Americans, aware that the moment cannot last forever, begin to prepare for what comes next. Orders still exist. Procedures still matter. War, even in its final days, does not simply stop. Yet the way these orders are carried out now is unmistakably different from what the nurses had imagined in their darkest hours. A senior American officer arrives, his boots echoing softly as he walks through the ruined hospital, his expression serious but not cruel. He takes in the scene quickly: the empty ration tins, the women seated against the wall, the lowered weapons of his men. There is no anger in his eyes, only calculation and fatigue. He speaks briefly to the soldiers, his voice low and controlled, then turns to the nurses. Though most of his words are lost to the language barrier, his tone is firm and measured. The message is clear enough. They are prisoners of war now, but they will not be harmed. A translator, hastily found among the troops, repeats the message in halting German. Several nurses sag with relief, one pressing a hand to her forehead as if steadying herself against a sudden dizziness. They are given time, something none of them expected. Time to gather their few belongings, to help one another to their feet, to breathe. The corridor that once felt like an execution chamber now feels like a passageway, leading not to death, but to an uncertain, survivable future. Outside, the evening air drifts in through shattered windows, cool and carrying the scent of smoke and wet earth. The day is fading, the light softening as the sun sinks behind the broken skyline of Leipzig. When the nurses are finally escorted outside, it is done without shouting or force. American soldiers walk alongside them, rifles slung rather than raised, eyes still alert but no longer hostile. The street is a landscape of devastation. Collapsed buildings, overturned carts, and smoldering debris lining the road. Fires burn in pockets, casting flickering orange light against the encroaching dusk. The nurses blink as they step into the open, some shielding their eyes, others staring in stunned silence at the city they barely recognize anymore. A few of the women glance back toward the hospital, its walls blackened and broken, windows gaping like empty sockets. For many of them, this building has been both a place of purpose and a place of terror, where they saved lives and watched countless others slip away. They had been certain it would also be the place where their own lives ended. One nurse pauses for just a heartbeat, her gaze lingering on the doorway, where she had begged for mercy only hours earlier. Her chest tightens, and she forces herself to keep walking, afraid that if she stops, the weight of it all will finally crush her. As they move through the streets, civilians emerge cautiously from cellars and doorways, watching the procession with wary eyes. Some recognize the nurses and look on with pity. Others see only prisoners and turn away. The war has fractured everyone's sense of right and wrong, leaving behind a quiet, collective numbness. The nurses feel it too, a strange disconnection from the world around them, as if they are watching events unfold from a distance rather than living them. For the American soldiers, the escort is routine on the surface, but internally it is anything but. Several glance at the nurses, at their bowed heads and slow steps, and feel a complicated mix of relief, sorrow, and something they rarely allow themselves: reflection. They have been trained to push forward, to take ground, to defeat the enemy. Yet moments like this linger in ways battles do not. One soldier wonders how he will explain this to anyone back home, how he will describe a day when the most powerful act he witnessed was not violence, but restraint. As night settles in, the group reaches a temporary holding area on the outskirts of the city. It is sparse but orderly, guarded yet calm. The nurses are registered, names written down by tired clerks working under lantern light. Each woman speaks her name aloud, her voice shaky but steadying with every repetition, as if reclaiming a piece of herself with each word. They are assigned places to rest, given blankets that smell faintly of damp canvas but feel like luxury against their skin. For the first time in weeks, perhaps months, they are allowed to sit without fear of being summoned back to the wards by the wail of sirens, or the screams of the wounded. Some of the nurses lie down immediately, exhaustion overwhelming them the moment they stop moving. Others remain awake, sitting quietly and staring into the darkness, minds replaying the day's events again and again. They think of the rifles that never fired, the food that was offered, the simple fact of still being alive. One woman presses her hand to her chest, feeling her heart beat steadily, almost in disbelief. Another whispers a prayer not of desperation, but of gratitude, though she is unsure exactly who she is thanking. The Americans rotate guard duty through the night, their figures moving in and out of the lamplight. From time to time, a soldier glances toward the resting nurses, checking that they are warm, that they are calm. There is no sense of triumph in the air, no celebration of victory. Only a deep, weary quiet, as if everyone involved understands that this is not an ending, but a pause, a fragile interlude between what has been and what will come next. In the days that follow, the memory of that first encounter continues to echo. The nurses are transferred, processed, eventually released or repatriated as the war formally ends. Many return to shattered hometowns, carrying scars that will never fully fade. Yet they also carry a story that feels almost unreal even as they tell it. That when they begged for mercy in the final days of the war, it was given not reluctantly, but freely. Some find it difficult to speak of, afraid that others will not believe them, or will dismiss it as an exception too small to matter. For the soldiers, the memory settles differently. Years later, long after uniforms are folded away and weapons laid to rest, some will still see that hospital corridor in their dreams. They will remember the sound of ration tins opening, the look on a young nurse's face as she realized she would live, the weight of choosing compassion when violence would have been easier, more expected. In a war defined by numbers, casualties, divisions, territory gained, this moment resists measurement. It does not change the outcome of the war. It does not erase the horrors that came before or after, but it endures. History will record the fall of Leipzig, the movements of armies, the signatures on surrender documents. It will not record the quiet march of exhausted nurses into the evening, or the way firelight reflected off tear-streaked faces as they walked beneath a darkening sky. Yet for those who were there, that is what remains. Not the sound of gunfire, but the silence that followed it. Not the power to destroy, but the decision not to. In the ruins of a city brought to its knees, amid the final tremors of a world war, mercy passed quietly from one human being to another and changed them both. And long after the rubble was cleared and the uniforms replaced with ordinary clothes, that moment continued to live on. Not as a footnote, but as a reminder that even at history's most brutal edge, humanity still had the power to choose a different path.